He was born in California. He holds an American passport. He was raised inside two of the most powerful criminal families in Mexico. And today, at 41 years old, he may be sitting on the throne left empty by the man he called his stepfather. His real name is Juan Carlos Valencia González. His alias inside the Jalisco New Generation Cartel is El Tres, or R3. In the United States, he is also known as El Pelón, or simply JP. Inside the cartel's organizational chart, that number is not a casual nickname. Number 1 was El Mencho. Number 2 was his son Ruben, El Menchito. Number 3 was him. El Menchito has been in prison in the United States for more than a decade, serving a life sentence. El Mencho died on February 22, 2026 in Tapalpa, Jalisco, during a military operation backed by American intelligence. And El Tres is still free, still operating. The United States Department of State, the National Counterterrorism Center, the DEA, and Mexico's Attorney General's office all identify him as the most likely figure to fill that vacant space. His name appeared on social media within hours of the operation. A video that began circulating showed 3 men in tactical gear, one of them seated reading documents, claiming that Juan Carlos Valencia González had been designated as the new leader of the CJNG. No Mexican authority confirmed that video. None could disprove it with evidence. And in the universe of drug trafficking, controlled uncertainty is also a way of communicating power. This is not a video about just another cartel figure. This is a video about the man who has spent years preparing for this moment without almost anyone seeing it coming. About the 2 inheritances he carries, one of blood and one of fire. About what the documents leaked by Guacamaya Leaks say about him that the media has not explained with the detail it deserves. About why the corridos of Natanael Cano, Gabito Ballesteros, and Luis R. Conríquez have been crowning him since 2024. About the formal charges that hang over him in Washington, and about the reasons why, despite everything he has in his favor, his rise is not guaranteed. At the end of this video, we are going to break down the 3 scenarios that security analysts are working with right now about his future, and one of them changes everything you think you know about how succession really works inside the CJNG. To understand El Tres, you first have to understand that he was not born inside the CJNG. He was born inside organized crime long before that cartel existed. And to understand that, you have to understand the family that shaped him. His biological father is Armando Valencia Cornelio, known as El Maradona, the former leader of the Millennium Cartel. That cartel, active throughout the 1990s and into the early 2000s, operated primarily in Jalisco and Michoacán, and it was precisely from its ashes, its roots, its alliances, and its internal wars that the CJNG would eventually emerge. El Tres's father was not a subordinate in that cartel. He ran it. Juan Carlos Valencia González was born already inside that criminal elite at the highest level that world has to offer, where conversations about territory and violence are part of the family vocabulary from childhood. His mother is Rosalinda González Valencia, known inside the organization as La Jefa, a woman identified by intelligence services as the person responsible for the financial infrastructure of the family network tied to the CJNG. Rosalinda was imprisoned in the Morelos State Penitentiary and was later released. What few analyses emphasize with sufficient clarity is that Rosalinda is not only El Tres's mother. She is also the sister of Abigail González Valencia, known as El Queenie, one of the co-founders of the CJNG, alongside El Mencho himself. In the CJNG, everything stays in the family, say those who study it. In the case of El Tres, that phrase carries a meaning that goes far beyond the popular saying. It is a precise structural description of how this man got to where he is, with blood connections on both sides of the cartel's founding. Juan Carlos Valencia González was born on September 12, 1984, in Santa Ana, California. He is a United States citizen by birth. He holds dual nationality. which means that if he were ever captured in Mexico, the United States could claim jurisdiction and request his extradition with the same solid legal arguments it used against El Menchito, the same arguments it used against El Chapo, and the same arguments Washington has shown it is willing to use against any Mexican cartel leader who has documented connections to American territory. When his mother Rosalinda established her relationship with Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, El Mencho, Juan Carlos became the stepson of the most wanted man in Mexico. He was not direct blood of the founder, but he was trusted family. And in an organization built on clan logic with a structural culture of distrust toward outsiders, that family position carries a weight that money alone cannot buy. His alias, El Tres, has a precise structural explanation that conventional analyses do not always develop in detail. The CJNG organizes its inner circle with numerical codes that are not merely nicknames, but formal positions in the organizational hierarchy. Number 1 was El Mencho, the undisputed visible head. Number 2 was Ruben Oseguera González, El Menchito, the biological son and the heir designated by the founder himself over many years. Number 3 was Juan Carlos, the operational stepson, the one who did the work that the top two could not or would not do in person. That numbering system is not hierarchical in absolute terms, but functional. And the function of El Tres was the most dangerous of all, commanding the cartel's armed wing. From a young age, his criminal career began taking shape in the shadows of that family. His uncles, the leaders and founders of Los Quenis, along with his stepfather Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, brought him into drug trafficking before he could build any public identity of his own. That early entry into organized crime at the highest possible level gave him something that cannot be bought with money. Time. Time to learn, time to build loyalties, time to design the instrument of power that today makes him the most complete candidate for succession. There is a detail that security analysts repeat consistently when they talk about El Tres, and that the media has not put in its proper context. The number 3 was not just a rank inside the CJNG. For years it was a transitional position, the place held by someone being prepared for something greater, without that something greater having a defined date yet. When El Menchito fell in 2015 and was extradited to the United States, that transition accelerated. El Tres stopped being third in a line of succession and became second in practice, even though the official organizational chart never updated the title. That gap between operational reality and the official hierarchy is one of the most characteristic features of how the CJNG manages internal power. Nobody advances through a press release. Advancement is demonstrated in the field, in results, in the ability to keep the person above you alive. For 10 years, El Tres did exactly that. He kept El Mencho alive while the entire American and Mexican intelligence apparatus was hunting him. And that, inside the cartel's economy of loyalties, has a value that no other candidate can claim in a comparable way. The CJNG's family model also has an economic dimension that conventional analyses tend to overlook. The González Valencia family, to which El Tres's mother belongs, is not simply a network of personal relationships. It is a financial control network that for years was described by American intelligence services as the accounting backbone of the cartel. Rosalinda González Valencia was identified as the person responsible for moving and laundering the resources generated by the organization, and Los Quenis, Rosalinda's brothers led by Abigail El Quini, were the architects of the money laundering system that allowed the CJNG to reinvest its profits in legitimate businesses, real estate, and financial structures that are extremely difficult to dismantle. El Tres inherited access to that network. He did not only inherit the family name, he inherited the financial architecture that makes the cartel function beyond pure drug trafficking. That financial dimension matters right now because the succession is not only a question of military command, it is also a question of who holds the keys to the money flow system. A cartel without armed leadership can survive temporarily with regional commanders acting autonomously. A cartel without control over its financial flows fragments in a way that is nearly irreversible because the economic incentives that keep regional cells unified stop being coordinated from a center. El Tres, with access to the González Valencia network, holds that central control in a way that none of the other candidates possesses to the same degree. If there is one thing that sets El Tres apart from the other candidates, it is that he did not simply inherit a position. He built the most feared instrument of power in the CJNG from scratch, and he did it with the kind of efficiency that generates vertical loyalty inside a criminal organization that functions precisely because its members are afraid of failing those above them. String, who had turned that state into an open and costly war against the CJNG, and who had also begun to challenge the cartel's monopoly over fuel theft routes in the Basho region. El Maro was captured in August 2020. But the elite group did not disappear with that mission completed. On the contrary, it expanded, professionalized, and became the central instrument of the CJNG's violent foreign policy. The documents leaked by Guacamaya Leaks in 2022, obtained through the hack of Mexico's defense ministry systems, reveal in detail what this group actually represents, a fact that was undervalued at the time. According to those military files, the elite group led by Juan Carlos González Valencia began operations in Jalisco and then expanded to Michoacán, Guanajuato, Zacatecas, and in its most recent and most alarming phase, to Mexico City. This is not a regional group. It is not a territorial defense squad. It is a national power projection force with the capacity to operate simultaneously across multiple states. The same documents describe it in language that is unusual for formal military reports. They classify it as a paramilitary force capable of deploying rocket launchers, conducting high-impact operations, and maintaining offensive capacity on multiple fronts simultaneously. Conversations intercepted by military intelligence show elite group members describing their total dominance over entire states and claiming to be in direct communication with the big boss himself, meaning El Mencho in person. That was not the rhetoric of a subordinate trying to impress his peers. It was the description of a chain of command that was functioning in real time. In practical terms, the elite group does three things that no other CJNG unit does in the same way. First, it shields the cartel's top leadership. It is the personal protection ring of the command structure, the physical barrier between the bosses and the state. Second, it carries out selective violence operations, the assassinations and forced disappearances of specific targets that the organization needs to eliminate without directly implicating its top leaders. Third, it defends and captures disputed territory, especially against the expansion of the Sinaloa cartel and its various factions in the post-El Chapo era. In 2022, authorities linked El Tres to the kidnapping of two defense ministry officials in Puerto Vallarta. The operation was described as a direct reprisal for the capture of a CJNG ally. It was not an excess committed by some subordinate acting on his own. It was a calculated decision that, according to available reports, came down from above with explicit authorization. That level of operation, directed against Mexican government officials directly, is the signature of someone who holds the real command of the armed structure. Also in that period, 4 CJNG members detained in Jalisco and Nayarit confirmed during their interrogations that they operated under the direct orders of El Tres, not El Mencho, not some anonymous regional commander, Juan Carlos Valencia González, in person as their immediate operational chief. The Guacamaya Leaks documents also place Valencia González at the head of the southeastern Jalisco region, specifically the municipalities of Mazamitla, Jilotlan, Tecalitlan, and Tecaltitan. From there, he extended his operational zone to Colima in an alliance confirmed by the same documents with Alberto Castillo Rodriguez, El Chorro, El Mencho's son-in-law through his marriage to Jessica Johanna Oseguera, La Negra, who is also one of the current succession candidates. The fact that El Tres and El Chorro operated in alliance in Colima while both were competing for the same future position is one of those contradictions that only makes sense when you understand that in drug trafficking, alliances are functional and temporary, not ideological or permanent. Juan Carlos Valencia González is not only an intelligence target, he is a formally charged defendant in United States federal courts, and the case file that exists on him in Washington says more about his actual operations than most of the press reports that circulate about him. In 2019, a formal indictment filed before the Federal District Court for the District of Columbia charged him with conspiracy to manufacture and distribute cocaine and methamphetamine for importation into the United States. The court documents detail that in that year, Valencia González conspired with others to transport more than 5 kilograms of cocaine and 500 grams or more of methamphetamine from Mexico northward. The same judicial filings allege that he carried and used firearms to carry out those trafficking operations. This is not a generic charge. It has dates, it has quantities, it has a description of methods. But the history before 2019 is even more revealing about when and how he began building his criminal trajectory. According to intelligence reports reviewed by specialized media, as far back as 2007, when he was barely 22 years old, he participated in operations related to the transportation of more than 5 kilograms of cocaine and significant quantities of methamphetamine from Mexico into United States territory. That was before the CJNG formally existed as an organization, before El Mencho had consolidated his control over Jalisco. In 2007, El Tres was already operating in transnational drug trafficking routes. The training was long and very deep. The Office of Foreign Assets Control of the United States Department of the Treasury, known as OFAC, formally identified him as a significant transnational narcotics trafficking actor. That designation has practical consequences that go beyond symbolism. It freezes any assets that may be linked to him in the American financial system. It prevents businesses and individuals under United States jurisdiction from conducting any transaction with him or his networks. And it activates interagency cooperation mechanisms that would otherwise operate more independently and more slowly. The Department of State offers $5 million for information leading to his capture. That figure is lower than the $15 million that was offered for El Mencho, but it is important to put it in its proper context. $5 million in the universe of criminal informants is an amount that radically changes economic incentives in any community where that money is unreachable by any other means. And that community is precisely the one that surrounds El Tres in his operational zone in southeastern Jalisco and in Colima. There is another element of the American legal file on El Tres that analyses have overlooked, and that is fundamental for understanding the level of exposure he faces before United States justice. The indictment filed in the District of Columbia in 2019 is not the only legal instrument that exists against him. The OFAC, Treasury, and State Department designations create a web of legal obligations surrounding any person or entity that has any kind of financial contact with him, some whether direct or indirect. That means his commercial partners outside Mexico, his distribution networks in Europe and Asia, his counterparts in Colombia and Ecuador who supply him with cocaine and chemical precursors, are all under permanent pressure that any connection to El Tres can trigger sanctions affecting their own operations. That pressure did not exist in the same way over El Mencho, who was never an American citizen, and whose exposure to the United States legal system was more limited in jurisdictional terms. El Tres inherits the cartel plus the responsibility of managing that additional pressure from day one. One of the corridos dedicated to him includes a direct reference to that reward with an attitude of defiance that does not appear coincidental. The lyrics allude to there being a large sum for those who talk, and to the fact that they already know where he lives and can come find him. That kind of public challenge to American authorities is a communication aimed at very specific recipients. It is not directed at federal agents. It is directed at the CJNG's own members, for whom the message is that their leader is not afraid of the $5 million or of those who offer it, and that, inside the organization's symbolic economy, is worth more than the money itself. In our previous video about CJNG succession, we explained that narco-corridos are not entertainment. They are strategic communications that circulate in public space because they cannot circulate anywhere else without generating direct evidence. They are messages from a criminal organization to its own members, to its rivals, and to the state, coded in music so that no one can use them as direct proof in court, but which any analyst with the right context can read for what they are: intelligence reports with a melody. The case of El Tres illustrates that principle with a clarity that mainstream media has not highlighted sufficiently. The most important corrido is Presidente, released in 2024 and performed by three of the most streamed artists in contemporary Mexican regional music: Gabito Ballesteros, Luis R. Conríquez, and Natanael Cano. Three names that do not record together by accident. Three artists operating at the highest level of the genre who know exactly what they are singing and for whom they are singing it. The production, distribution, and promotion of that track costs significant resources that someone paid for. And in the narco-corrido universe, the person who pays for the corrido is the person who authorizes the message. The song explicitly mentions the order of the three and also of the M, with M as an obvious reference to El Mencho. It mentions weapons shipped from Russia to Jalisco by direct line. It describes a command structure where El Tres and El Mencho operate in parallel as co-figures of authority. It is not a love letter. It is a musical organizational chart that any CJNG member in any state of Mexico can listen to and understand without the need for a formal memo or a leadership meeting. Months before Presidente, Luis R. Conríquez had already recorded a corrido dedicated specifically to El Mencho's stepson, along with other tracks where CJNG members explicitly place El Tres as their active leader. Lyrics that circulated before February 22, 2026, speak of there already being a three who leads the way, and of everyone following the boss three. The baton is the musical conductor's instrument, but in this context, it is criminal command. And the reference to the loyal soldier who does not break is the description of the armed loyalty that backs that command in concrete terms. The reference to Russia as a weapons source in Presidente is not poetic metaphor or corrido exaggeration. It is an operational assertion about elite group supply routes that intelligence analysts took note of. Beyond the weaponry, the corrido describes as arriving from Russia to Jalisco matches the type of material that military forces have reported in operations against the CJNG in recent years, including rocket launchers and high-capacity weapons not manufactured in Mexico. But there is a detail in the Guacamaya Leaks documents that complicated this picture before February 22nd and that remains relevant for understanding the cartel's internal tensions. The same military files that document El Tres's elite group also identify Luis R. Conríquez, not as El Tres's exclusive artist, but as the exclusive artist of Ricardo Ruiz Velasco, El Doble R, the man who controls Guadalajara and who is another active succession candidate. If Luis R. Conríquez is El Doble R's artist according to the military documents, and he records Presidente for El Tres according to the public narrative, that suggests one of two things. Either the two leaders have a coordination relationship that the corridos are publishing in a way both approved, or someone paid more to make the collaboration happen, which would imply a move by El Tres to capture his closest rival's communication channel. Neither interpretation is innocent. Both imply a symbolic war that was fought in the musical space long before the first shot was fired in Tapalpa. If this kind of analysis is what you are looking for, subscribe to the channel right now so you do not miss the real-time follow-up on this story. Every new video goes one level deeper. Hit like if what you are watching is giving you context that the mainstream media was not giving you. And leave your analysis in the comments. Do you think El Tres consolidates control, or does the cartel fragment? We read the best comments in the next video. Pete, there is an argument that circulates in almost every analysis of El Tres, and that needs to be examined with more care than it usually receives. The argument is simple. He is El Mencho's stepson. he is family. Therefore, he has an advantage over the other candidates. That argument contains truth, but it also conceals a trap that the most serious analysts are identifying right now. To start with, we need to be precise about what being a stepson means in this context. That he is not direct blood of El Mencho. El Menchito was direct blood. El Menchito was the designated heir for years, the name everyone gave when asked who would succeed the founder. And El Menchito has been in a maximum security cell in the United States, serving a life sentence since 2015. Lineage only takes you as far as the structure below you allows, and as far as the will of the regional commanders who ultimately execute orders or do not execute them. El Tres has something that El Menchito could not develop precisely because he was captured before he could do so. He has years of autonomous operational work. He has the elite group as an instrument he built himself, not inherited from anyone. He has relationships built in the field with regional commanders who know him as their direct chief, not as a name in an abstract organizational chart. For that difference between knowing someone as a nominal authority figure and having obeyed them in the field of operations is fundamental to understanding why El Tres has real advantages that go far beyond the family name. However, there is a trap in the dynastic argument that security analysts are highlighting right now and that deserves to be taken seriously. The CJNG does not function like a medieval kingdom where the king's son automatically inherits the throne with the tacit support of all the vassals. It functions as a complex criminal franchise with a central head and dozens of regional cells that have operated with increasing autonomy throughout El Mencho's years of deteriorating health. Those regional cells owe loyalty to the CJNG brand and to the territory and route-sharing structure that guarantees their income, but their personal loyalty to the central leadership is a variable that must be renewed constantly through the combination of economic incentives and demonstrated coercive capability. El Mencho maintained that control by combining fear and money for 15 years in a way that no regional commander had either the incentive or the courage to challenge. El Tres is going to have to demonstrate that he can do the same in an environment where there is no longer a single undisputed authority figure, and where several regional commanders have had time to calculate their own options. Fear in this industry is demonstrated through verifiable actions, not through family names or tactical videos circulating on social media. What intelligence reports from the immediate period after February 22nd do confirm is that anonymous sources inside the cartel indicated that El Tres had been designated as the new chief in the hours following the Tapalpa operation. Those sources are not publicly verifiable, but the fact that multiple specialized outlets independently reported them within 48 hours of the operation suggests that something happened inside the organization that same day that was significant enough to generate that kind of coordinated leaks. Something stands out when you compare El Tres to the other succession candidates. He is the one who appears least in the daily press headlines. He is the one least associated with visible operations, public statements, any or exhibitionist displays of power that generate media coverage. In an organization where several regional leaders have cultivated an almost celebrity criminal image that turns them into corrido characters before operational clandestine agents, El Tres has operated with a deliberately low profile that contrasts with his actual rank inside the hierarchy. That is not an accident. It is strategy, and a strategy that has proven its effectiveness over years. The security analysts who have studied his profile note that from a young age, he adopted the low profile as his primary operational advantage. While El Menchito was making statements and appearing in photographs, while other CJNG commanders had corridos with their full names and aliases on the video cover, El Tres was building the elite group, expanding territory in Jalisco and Colima, and consolidating international fentanyl routes without generating the headlines that attract capture operations. The anonymity strategy works until the power vacuum above you turns you into the most wanted target on the continent. El Financiero described that profile in an analysis published in March 2025, almost a year before the Tapalpa operation, with a phrase that now turns out to be particularly precise. He is more ruthless than El Mencho, but does it without the ego that generates news. That comparison deserves analysis because ruthlessness without public ego is exactly what makes someone simultaneously effective and difficult to track. Intelligence operations are built on patterns of observable behavior. The person who generates no observables is the hardest to find. But there is a paradox in that strategy that February 22, 2026 activated in an irreversible way. The low profile protects you while there is someone higher in the hierarchy absorbing the attention of governments and rivals. When that someone is no longer there, the vacuum they leave turns the next number down into the most visible target by default. It does not matter how long you have invested in being invisible. When number 1 disappears, number 3 becomes number 1, and number 1 can never be invisible. It would be a mistake to present El Tres as the inevitable successor. He is not. There are concrete and verifiable reasons why his consolidation as the new CJNG leader is far from automatic, and understanding those reasons is fundamental to understanding the critical period Mexico is living through right now. The first threat is internal to the cartel. The regional commanders who have spent years building their own fiefdoms inside the CJNG's franchise model have no obligation to accept a vertical transition to El Tres simply because he carries the number 3 in the organizational chart. El Jardinero controls vast territories in Michoacán, Jalisco, Nayarit, Guerrero, and Zacatecas, and he is the most powerful leader inside the CJNG who does not belong to either of the two founding families, which makes him a pivotal figure with the real capacity to tilt alliances toward any candidate or against any candidate. LRR controls Guadalajara, the cartel's historical epicenter, the city where the oldest financial networks and the most deeply rooted loyalties reside. El Sapo has the explicit backing of sectors of El Mencho's direct family and holds the recruitment structure under his control. If that friction among these actors is not resolved in the coming weeks, the cartel could fragment, and fragmentation historically generates more homicidal violence than consolidation under a single command. The second threat is judicial and geopolitical. El Tres has had a federal indictment open in the United States since 2019. He has $5 million on his head. And now that El Mencho is dead, the interest of American federal agencies in El Tres is going to increase exponentially, not decrease. Washington just watched a Mexican military operation, backed by American intelligence, eliminate the CJNG's leader. That creates incentives in both governments to replicate that success against the next figure. El Tres is that next figure, and his American citizenship, which in other circumstances might be a resource, in this context is also a concrete vulnerability that gives Washington legal jurisdiction to pursue him with instruments that Mexican citizens do not face in the same way. The third threat is external and rival. The Sinaloa cartel, in its post-El Chapo phase with Los Chapitos as the dominant force in parts of the organization, has been waiting for years for an opportunity to take territory from the CJNG, especially in Guanajuato and Zacatecas, where the elite group has had to operate more defensively in recent years. Every day that passes without consolidated CJNG leadership is a day its rivals can advance at the margins, capture disputed plazas, and renegotiate alliances with CJNG regional commanders who are uncertain about their loyalty. War does not wait for the throne to stabilize. The fourth threat is the most subtle but possibly the most dangerous of all. El Tres built the elite group with a level of operational autonomy that was his strength for years. But that same level of autonomy means the elite group has its own mid-level commanders with their own field-built loyalties, with their own calculations about who would serve them best as a chief. If any of those mid-level commanders decides that the Tapalpa moment is also the moment to recalibrate their own position, El Tres could face internal dissent precisely in the instrument he built to protect himself. The pattern is not new in Mexican cartel history. The Zetas were the Gulf cartel's armed wing until they decided not to be. And when they made that decision, the map of Mexican drug trafficking changed in a violent and lasting way. There is a dimension of El Trez's story that analysis has not developed sufficiently, and it is the dimension of his American citizenship and what that means for the immediate future of the organization he may lead. Juan Carlos Valencia González is, technically, a citizen of the United States. He was born in Santa Ana, California. He has documented connections on both sides of the border. According to American judicial files, he built distribution networks that operate inside United States territory. He knows that market from the inside in a way that El Mencho, who never set foot on American soil as an adult and who ran his entire career from the Michoacan mountains and the Jalisco highlands, never had and never needed. That has implications for the economy of the cartel he may potentially lead. The CJNG has an active presence not only in Mexico, but in routes that extend to the United States, Canada, Europe, Asia, and Oceania, according to DEA reports. The primary client of any Mexican drug trafficking organization remains the American market, which consumes most of the fentanyl that the CJNG produces, with the chemical precursors entering through the port of Manzanillo. A leader who knows that market from the inside has real operational advantages for maintaining and expanding those routes in an environment where competition with the Sinaloa cartel is by definition global. But that same familiarity with American territory is also the reason Washington is going to move faster against him than it moved against his stepfather over 15 years. El Mencho was a ghost with deep roots in the Michoacan mountains who never left his geographic comfort zone and who built a personal security system so sophisticated that it took a decade and a half to breach, and only because of a human leak inside his closest circle. El Tres is an American citizen with documentary exposure on both sides of the border, with an active federal indictment in Washington since 2019. And with a profile that American intelligence services have been systematically building for years. That combination facilitates investigations, facilitates additional charges, and could facilitate his capture within a time frame that El Mencho never experienced. In February 2025, exactly 1 year before the Tapalpa operation, the United States formally designated the CJNG as a foreign terrorist organization. That designation is not symbolic. It activates additional legal mechanisms that permit the use of counterterrorism tools, increases diplomatic pressure on Mexico to cooperate in capturing its leaders, and facilitates coordination among the DEA, FBI, Department of Homeland Security, and other agencies that would otherwise work with slower and more bureaucratic information-sharing protocols. El Tres, if he takes command, will be the first leader of a foreign terrorist-designated organization who is also an American citizen. That combination is unprecedented in the history of Mexican drug trafficking and generates a type of institutional pressure that El Mencho never faced directly during his reign. The intelligence services that have spent days analyzing the situation following February 22nd are working with 3 scenarios for the CJNG's immediate future under the possible leadership of El Tres. They are not mutually exclusive. They can occur in sequence. And the difference between them is not only political. It is the difference between what level of violence the communities living in the territories this cartel controls are going to experience. The first scenario is rapid consolidation. El Tres takes advantage of the cartel's moment of maximum vulnerability to impose himself before the regional commanders can organize a viable alternative. He uses the elite group as an instrument of internal pressure, negotiates territories with El Jardinero and El Doble R through agreements that preserve their regional autonomy in exchange for nominal recognition of central command, and offers the sectors of El Mencho's family that support El Sapo a relevant operational position inside the new structure. In this scenario, the CJNG maintains its franchise structure with a new name at the top, but with the same functional logic and relatively intact economic flows. It is the least violent scenario for the civilian population and the one that best serves the cartel's medium-term economic interests. It is also the scenario that American and Mexican intelligence services prefer not to see happen, because a stable CJNG under El Tres is a CJNG that continues functioning at the same threat level as before February 22nd. The second scenario is delayed consolidation. El Tres eventually achieves control, but not before weeks or months of internal tension, across operations, and territorial repositioning that generates localized violence in the friction zones between factions. Jalisco and Michoacán would be the most exposed states in this scenario, with the Sinaloa cartel trying to take advantage of the period of uncertainty to advance in Guanajuato and Zacatecas, where the elite group has had a presence but not the same consolidation level it has in western Mexico. Homicide rates would rise in those regions before the new equilibrium is established. It could last weeks, or it could last months, depending on how quickly El Tres can resolve internal disputes and demonstrate that the elite group responds to him unconditionally. The third scenario is structural fragmentation. El Tres fails to impose authority over the regional commanders within the critical 90-day window. The CJNG divides into 3 or 4 autonomous organizations that preserve the brand but not the unified command. El Jardinero controls the Michoacán-Nayarit axis as his own independent territory. El R keeps Guadalajara as his personal fiefdom. El Sapo operates with Oseguera family backing in his own region, and El Tres ends up as the leader of a powerful faction, but not of the complete cartel. This scenario most closely resembles what happened with the Gulf Cartel after the split with the Zetas in 2010, or with the Beltran-Leyva cartel after Arturo Beltran's death in 2009. And it is the most dangerous for public security in the medium term, because fragmentation eliminates the possibility of tacit negotiation with a central command and turns every territorial dispute into an open war without an internal arbiter. The analysts are divided on which of the 3 is most likely. What is not divided is the time window. The first 90 days after February 22nd are critical for the final outcome. The clock has been running from the moment El Mencho's body was officially identified by the Mexican government. Every week that passes without a clear signal of command consolidation is a week that brings Scenario 3 closer and pushes the possibility of a relatively ordered transition further away. To complete the analysis of the 3 scenarios, a variable needs to be added that intelligence models are beginning to include, but that media outlets have not yet developed in a systematic way: the variable of the 2026 FIFA World Cup. Guadalajara is one of the confirmed host cities for the tournament. That means in the coming months, while El Tres is trying to consolidate his command over the CJNG, as both the Mexican and American governments will face additional and very public pressure to demonstrate that they can guarantee security in the host cities. Guadalajara is the CJNG's historical heartland. If El R maintains his control over the city during that period, or if the succession process generates visible violence in downtown Guadalajara, the political and diplomatic impact on Mexico would be at a scale the government cannot afford. That creates very concrete incentives for the Mexican state to try to accelerate the capture or neutralization of El Tres before the tournament begins, while simultaneously pushing for CJNG stabilization that reduces visible violence in the host cities. It is a paradox that security analysts are openly acknowledging. The state needs simultaneously to capture El Tres and to prevent the CJNG from fragmenting explosively. Those 2 objectives are difficult to make compatible within the same time period. There are elements in El Tres's story and in the events of February 22nd that almost no outlet has developed with the depth they deserve and that are fundamental for understanding the complete picture of what is happening in Mexico right now. The first element is the synchrony of February 22nd. That day was not only the day El Mencho died, it was also the day El Jardinero was detained, the only one of the major succession candidates who fell on the same day the founder fell. That synchrony could be operational coincidence, or it could be a plan executed with surgical precision. If it was a plan, the question is whose. If Mexican security forces, with American intelligence backing, decided to strike El Mencho and El Jardinero on the same day, that suggests a prior and very detailed analysis existed about who was the most dangerous candidate for a transition that would not favor state interests. If El Jardinero's detention holds legally and he does not go free in the coming days or weeks, the succession board changes radically. The candidate with the most territory controlled outside the family structure is removed from the game, and El Tres loses his main regional competitor with real capacity to dispute. The second element is the death of Rubén Guerrero Valadez. On that same February 22nd, the son of Heraclio Guerrero Martinez, El Tío Laco, also died in the operation. Rubén Guerrero Valadez, known inside the organization as R1, was confirmed dead by the Michoacán State Attorney General's office. That death changes El Tío Laco's position on the board in a way that conventional analysis have not developed sufficiently. A man who has just lost his son in the same operation that killed the founder of the cartel he serves may make decisions that are not rational in strategic terms, but that are completely understandable in human terms. Grief generates unpredictability, and unpredictability in an actor who controls fuel theft schemes in Michoacán and has connections inside the elite group is a variable that El Tres needs to manage very carefully in the coming months. The third element is the paradox of the tactical video that circulated on social media. The video showing armed men proclaiming El Tres as the new chief can be read as a signal of strength, a deliberate announcement of an orderly transition so that regional commanders and rank-and-file members understand who is in charge now. But in the Mexican cartel universe, public proclamations of power often precede the periods of greatest vulnerability. When someone needs to proclaim in a video that they are the boss, it frequently means that not everyone who matters already knows it, or that those who know it have not yet accepted it unconditionally. The video's publicity may be a consolidation tool, or it may be a signal that consolidation had not yet occurred at the moment it was recorded. None of these readings excludes the others. Mexican cartel history is full of moments where the truth was simultaneously multiple and mutually exclusive, depending on the angle from which it was viewed. El Tres is 41 years old. He has spent more than 2 decades inside organized crime. He was shaped between the Valencia family of the Millennium Cartel and the González family of the CJNG. He built the most sophisticated paramilitary force in the history of the Jalisco New Generation Cartel. He faces formal charges in 2 countries. He has $5 million on his head. He has corridos crowning him recorded by 3 of the most listened-to artists in the world. And he has had, since February 22nd, 2026, an opportunity that only exists because the man who occupied the position above his is no longer there. What he does with that opportunity in the coming days, in the coming weeks, in the coming 90 days, will determine something that goes beyond who commands the CJNG. It will determine whether Mexico faces an ordered transition inside the most powerful criminal organization in the country, or whether what is coming is the violent fragmentation that communities in Jalisco, Michoacán, Colima, and Guanajuato will pay for in real human cost without having made any decision that deserved it. There is one final element about the person of Juan Carlos Valencia González that conventional analyses have not developed, and that is revealing about the nature of the challenge he faces from now on. El Tres has built his operational reputation largely on effective violence. The elite group is known for its extreme methods, for executing targets with a level of precision and ruthlessness that generates the fear the organization needs to maintain its territorial control. That reputation is an asset inside the cartel, but it is simultaneously a liability before the state. Every operation attributed to the elite group is an additional element in the case file that American prosecutors will continue building on him. Every elite group member captured in the coming months is a potential witness that American prosecutors can use to expand that case file. El Tres will govern the CJNG if he manages to do so, knowing that the instrument that brought him to power is also the instrument that can most directly be used to bring him before a federal court in Washington. That contradiction has no elegant resolution. It only has management, and the level of skill with which he manages it will determine how long he lasts in the position he is trying to consolidate. February 22nd, 2026 was not only the end of the El Mencho era. It was the starting point of a new story whose protagonist has not yet been able to present himself publicly. El Tres operates in the shadows because the shadows are his natural habitat. But the shadows are shrinking. Number 1 is dead. Number 2 is in a cell. The intelligence services of 2 countries have him at the center of their radar. The cartel's regional commanders are watching him to decide whether they obey him or challenge him. And the 90-day clock keeps running. Indifferent to what anyone wants or fears, number 1 is dead. Number 2 is locked away forever in an American cell. Number 3 is somewhere in Mexico that no government has been able to publicly confirm. And the CJNG, with tens of thousands of members and a presence in more than 22 states, is waiting, as it always waits, patiently, with contained violence, until someone who deserves it occupies the place that was left empty, or until the dispute over that place breaks it into pieces that no one will be able to put back together in the same way. Neither of those options is good for anyone who lives in the territories where this story is written. Subscribe to the channel to follow this story in real time. Hit like if this video helped you understand something that mainstream media was not explaining to you, and leave your analysis in the comments. This story is not over. It has barely begun.